We kick off this evening with a look at the cinema.
I'm not a complicated man. I like cinema.
It's beautiful, beautiful cinema.
Cinema history come to life.
I found my solace in the small cinema I went to every Thursday night.
I'm a professor of cinema.
I go to the cinema for the stories.
There was no competition between the cinema and seminar.
I mean, it's not within the realm of conventional cinema.
And now,
here's Space and Johnson
with a cinema review.
It is Monday, August 26th, 8 EST, and thank you for joining me for another episode of Cinemaster's Reviews. This week we are reviewing the Crow remake directed by Rupert Sanders and Blink Twice, the directorial debut of actress Zoe Kravitz. Thank you all for joining me this week. I say we jump right in, starting with the first movie we're reviewing tonight, The Crow, directed by Rupert Sanders. This is the 2024 remake of the 1994 film starring Brandon Lee. There have been many attempts to get this movie off the ground. This movie has been in production hell for years and decades. They've been wanting to do a remake of this film for so many years. So many people, so many Hollywood studio execs at one point just thought it was cursed, thought it was never going to be made. But finally, we have a version with Bill Skarsgård. This version, like the original version, it follows a man by the name of Eric Draven, who meets a woman by the name of Shelley, who he bonds with after she is on the run from a criminal who has given his soul over to the devil in order to have mystical powers. She ends up witnessing a crime from him, so she ends up going into a mental facility in order to hide out. This is where she meets Eric. They bond over their love of music. They escape from the mental facility, and wouldn't you know it, without going into too many spoilers, the only reason I'm going to say this is because this is how the original version happens, and this is the storyline this movie follows. The bad guys end up tracking them down. They end up killing her, think they kill Eric. Eric ends up coming from the dead, and he ends up trying to seek revenge for what these villains did to Shelley. I just recently watched the first Crow for the first time, and honestly, I really enjoyed it. It has just such a unique style, such unique visuals. I think Brandon Lee, obviously, it is extremely tragic what happened to him. If you didn't know, while filming the movie, there was a scene where characters were supposed to shoot at the actor, and they ended up they thought there were blanks in the gun. Turns out there was actual ammunition, and they ended up killing Brandon Lee. He died during production. That's part of the reason why so many people believe this film to be cursed in a way. So yeah, it really is just like a simple revenge story, but it's really effective. And yeah, Brandon Lee, he was such a star, gone way too soon. The amount of pain that he conveys with just his eyes, I think, is just so incredible. Going into this movie, I didn't have the highest of hopes. I didn't think the trailers looked incredibly great. But if so many execs were fighting to get this movie made, it means we probably have a really great idea, probably something that was really worth to be told again, to be retold like this. How was this movie? Well, unfortunately, it's not great. The saddest thing I can say about this movie is it doesn't do anything better than the original movie did. It is clearly inspired. It's not a direct copy of the original. There are some differences, but there's nothing from the performances, from the action scenes, from the story beats to different things that from different angles that it goes in the story to this movie is now a lot more heavy on lore and why Eric Draven gets these powers of immortality. Spends a lot more time trying to explain that. But yeah, nothing it does is better than the original. And when you have a remake that in no way improves upon the original, I think that is unfortunately when people talk about unnecessary remakes, that is to me when a remake feels the most unnecessary, when it doesn't really do anything better than what the original strove out to do. Bill Skarsgård is playing the lead of Eric Draven, and I will give him credit. he is doing the best he can with the limited amount of material that this role gives him. Bill Skarsgård is someone I like. He's used to playing these weird types of characters. I think he was really good as the lead earlier this year in Boy Kills World. He played a mute character in that movie. I think he was great in John Wick Chapter 4. I thought he was really fun as Pennywise in the It movies. This character is a lot more subdued than those other characters. He's often playing the part in a very like monotone way, very like in key with his emotions, except for certain points where he does end up dying, and when he does start like conveying with the spirits, where you see his emotions get a little bit more elevated, and like what is going on. And that is where I think you see the most from Bill Skarsgård. Again, the character is kind of underwritten. It's not as mysterious as the character of Eric Draven was in the original movie. But I do think Bill Skarsgård is doing the best with what he can do. I think one of the major issues with this movie, it is really just paced in an awful way. Something that I think is fun about the original movie, within the first 10 minutes, we open on Eric Draven. He's already been kind of like risen from the dead. We see certain flashbacks to what happened with him and his fiance. We see that they were killed on the night before they were going to get married. And within 10 minutes, he has donned the makeup and he has already sought out the mission for revenge. In this movie, the actual revenge part of the story doesn't happen until maybe around an hour into this hour and 50-minute movie. And it just makes you realize how slowly paced, how you're just waiting for things to start getting started. This movie takes a lot more time to expand on the relationship of Eric and Shelley, which unfortunately, while in the first movie wisely told us, showed us like very minor key things about the relationship through flashbacks. In this movie, we see them in the mental hospital, we see them bonding, and this would be okay if the relationship was written in a more interesting way. But unfortunately, I just don't think it was that well written. Bill Skarsgård is a good actor. I haven't seen FKA Twigs in too many things. I don't think she really brings a lot to the character of Shelley. That being said, I don't think the character is really given a ton, except for the fact that she's involved with the criminals and she's trying to get away. And when you have a movie that's trying to give all this lore to this story that didn't really need it and that lore isn't interesting, you end up with a movie that just doesn't really feel that interesting to watch. Like I said, all of the scenes expanding on the lore of this film, specifically with Eric in the afterlife, like when around the midpoint of this movie, when Shelley does end up dying and when Eric is taken to the place in between the living and the dead, we constantly keep cutting back to this like train, to this railroad, and Eric keeps talking with the spirit of this older guy, and we keep hearing things about like what the power of the crow gives to Eric, how he can now not die, how he can now use how his purpose in life is now to cleanse the sins of everyone that walks the face of the earth. It really is just kind of hogwash in a way, you're just kind of rolling your eyes at these super exposition heavy scenes. I have not seen this movie. I've heard a lot of people compare it to the 2005 film Constantine with Keanu Reeves. I have not seen that movie. I know that movie has its fans. Hearing it compared to this movie doesn't make me that interested in watching it, unfortunately, because I just think all the paranormal and all like the supernatural stuff in this movie just felt super unnecessary. The original movie kind of gets into that, but it knows that the more interesting stuff is seeing Eric Draven on such a personal journey, trying to take out these villains with Michael Wincott's top dollar, working with Ernie Hudson's character, who's a cop who is on the other side of the law. Honestly, I think that's just something that's kind of unfortunate with this movie, is it doesn't have the fun side characters that original movie had. Like that movie had Ernie Hudson, that movie had John Polito as the pawn shop owner. That movie felt like you were in a comic book, which when you're watching a comic book adaptation, it feels fun when you have these larger than life characters. This movie tries to play it in such a more subdued way where you just end up feeling bored while watching the film. Rupert Sanders is a director who he directed Huntsman Winter's War, which was the sequel to Snow White and the Huntsman, which I did not see. And he also directed the live-action remake of Ghost in the Shell with Scarlett Johansson, which I did see. He is someone that, and I didn't really like that movie either. He is someone that, while I don't think he makes particularly good movies, he has a way to make images jump out at you and just striking in a very visually appealing way. And that is something that I do want to give this movie credit for. A lot of the images in this movie are really cool. Obviously, The Crow is just something that it just feels cool when you're looking at it. Like, it just exudes this sort of like badassery. And I can say he kind of got that. He definitely nailed the gothic nature of it. While the original movie just felt more effortless, this movie just feels a little bit more try-hard in it. Like, I know this seems kind of pedantic to complain about. I hated the design of Eric Draven in this movie. He has all these like really emo tattoos. He has this awful haircut. And you're just sort of like rolling your eyes when you see this character, like, okay, like it just screams someone that's trying to be taken seriously and trying to be edgy, and it just doesn't come off great. The other thing that I kind of want to talk about, the soundtrack sucks of this movie. Like, the original soundtrack is like legendary for how good it is. Like, you have music by The Cure, you have music by Rage Against the Machine, you have music by all these bands from the time. This one, I think, had the opportunity to get a bunch of like really cool like underground bands, but the music of this, it just kind of seems unmemorable. It seems like alt pop in a way, and I just ended up rolling my eyes at the soundtrack. What I will say is the third act, while the majority of this movie I was pretty bored out of my mind, the third act of the movie, when Eric actually fully becomes the Crow, when he finally dons the makeup, or this movie's more edgy version of the makeup, even more edgy than the Crow, if you can believe that. When he's finally fully like makeuped out, when he's finally on his quest for revenge, I finally became a little bit more entertained when you now have Bill Skarsgård going up against the main villain, played by Danny Houston. The movie finally takes that extra step towards another layer of violence. When this movie wants to get bloody, it does end up getting bloody, and I do want to give the movie credit for there. So while I was watching the last 30 minutes of this movie, I was like, wow, I'm now actually starting to get starting to enjoy myself. This feels like The Crow again. It just sucks that we had to wait through about an hour and 20 minutes until we finally got to the point where the movie was finally like, okay, we can now finally be this version of The Crow, which there's nothing wrong with trying to tell a different version of the story, but you got to be interesting and you got to be somewhat appealing. And this movie just, it feels like Rupert Sanders took a Xanax while making it, because the story just felt so boring. So while the last act of this movie did help me say this movie wasn't a complete train wreck, the majority of this movie just didn't end up being that great, and nothing compares, and nothing about it is in any way superior to what the original Alex Proyas version gave you. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, 0 being absolutely awful, 10 being absolutely incredible, I'm going to go right in the middle, and I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Very mediocre film. Nothing about this movie I think was horrible, or nothing about it was really like that bad, but it just feels bland. It just feels unnecessary. And like I said, when you're a remake that does nothing better than the original, you really don't have any real reason to exist. Don't go see this in theaters. I would highly recommend you skip this movie. Don't even watch it. Just go watch the original version. I do think it holds up a lot better than those 90s comic book movie adaptations do. And I think you'll have a much better time if you just go watch the original Brandon Lee version, which is really, really good. But let's move on to our next movie, that being Blink Twice. This is, like I said, the directorial debut of Zoe Kravitz. She's an actress. If you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, if you've seen the Divergent movies, if you've seen The Batman, she played Catwoman. This is the first movie she's ever directed. It stars Naomi Ackel as a woman by the name of Frida. She is invited to a party by a, I should probably get the score out of the way. That is my bad. She's invited to a party by a tech entrepreneur by the name of Slater King. And while at this party, her and her friend, played by Alia Shawkat from Arrested Development, are invited to Slater's private island. At this party, Frida and Slater very much hit it off, and you can very clearly tell they have romantic chemistry. And they go to this island, and Frida and her best friend kind of think they're just getting like a few months away to just have some fun, do some psychedelic drugs, hang out with Slater and his friends and the other women that he invited. But slowly, as the movie keeps going on, you realize that this island hides a bit more sinister secrets than the main characters would have gathered earlier on. I will say for a directorial debut from Zoe Kravitz, it can go either way when you have a famous actor decide to get behind the director's chair and to just come out right and spoil my thoughts. I think Zoe Kravitz did a solid job with this one. Earlier this year, we saw Chris Pine make Pool Man, which I think was a terrible movie. Unfortunately, I give props to Chris Pine for making the movie he wanted. I think Zoe Kravitz did a much better job than Chris Pine behind the director's chair this time. Not everything was perfect. There were some kinks that she needed to iron out, but I think for a directorial debut, this was definitely a solid base hit. Something I want to say, the cast of this movie is stacked. I already mentioned that Naomi Ackel is in this movie. I mentioned Channing Tatum, Alia Shawkat. This movie also has Christian Slater as Slater's best friend. It has Simon Rex. If you saw Red Rocket, I think he gave the best performance in 2021 in Red Rocket, so it's fun to see him. Haley Joel Osment is in this movie as another one of Slater's friends. Slater's therapist is played by Kyle MacLachlan. I love every time Kyle MacLachlan shows up. Gina Davis is one of the other women on the island. So this movie is a no shortage of talent in its cast. Most of them are given pretty entertaining things to do, not like a ton to do. Only maybe like a few of them actually stand out. The one unfortunate thing I will say, with all this talent in the cast, having the movie be led by Naomi Ackel was maybe not the best decision. Naomi Ackel is someone who I've seen in a few movies. She plays Jada in Rise of Skywalker. Probably the most famous role she's had so far is she was Whitney Houston in the Whitney Houston biopic I Want to Dance with Somebody. She's not bad in this movie, but compared to everyone around her, she just doesn't have the energy and just doesn't quite have maybe the gravitas at this point to lead a thriller to lead a dark comedic thriller like this in the best way. I think one of her co-stars, one of her lesser known co-stars, Adria Jorna, who plays Sarah, while I was watching this movie, she was the one who I actually wished was in the lead role as Frida, because I think the amount of energy that she gives, the amount of just like raw talent that I saw from her on screen, I think was really, really fun. The information we're given about Sarah is she's someone that was on this like survival type reality show, and everyone kind of like talks her down because everyone just views her as like this competitive nut that is not fun to be around. But as the movie starts to unfold, Frida and Sarah start to befriend each other when they realize that something is going on this island. They team up in order to figure out the mystery that is going on. So watching this movie, I think Adria Jorna really, really shine in this side role. And I kind of wished watching the movie that she was the one playing the lead role. And the other person that I think was the big standout of the cast is Channing Tatum. I don't think it is that much of a spoiler if you've seen the trailers, if you've seen the if you've seen the poster. The character of Slater King has a bit more sinister background than what you were first led to believe. And I think Channing Tatum does a great job at playing the charming parts of Slater, like showing why this guy has so many people following him, why this guy has amounted this huge entourage behind him. And at the same time, when the movie does turn, playing those bit more villainous parts really, really well. Channing Tatum's having a very good year so far. And I'm down for it because I think he's a really, really enjoyable actor, and I'm excited to see him have these opportunities. I think Kravitz does. Zoe Kravitz in the director's chair, I think she does a really good job at One, from a visual standpoint, I think this movie looks really good. It's set on a tropical island. The movie has a lot of pretty shots. I think the colors are really nice. There are some scenes where it's very dark and it didn't really look like properly lit. And part of me thinks that may have just been like a first director mistake. It's not like super noticeable where I've seen certain movies that are very clearly not lit well, and it makes the movie unwatchable. It's not that bad, but there are certain night scenes where I'm watching and I'm like okay, there is a scene early on in the party where it's very dimly lit. A lot of shadows are being used, and it kind of just seems like it wasn't purposefully meant to be that way. And part of me just thinks that it was just an error on Zoe Kravitz's part. But when you are out on the island, when you are seeing just these sunny horizons, really nice images of the jungle, I do think it does look very, very nice. And yeah, I also think Zoe Kravitz does a great job at establishing a mystery, showing the twists and unveiling the twists in a very satisfying way. This movie does get very dark at points. It tackles a lot of interesting themes about is it easier to forget trauma than it is to tackle that trauma head on. And I think the part of this movie that I think unfortunately is its biggest fault is it likes to bring up all these really interesting themes, all these really interesting ideas, but it doesn't want to take the time to explore that. And movies can often be very good as idea pieces, but I think most audiences, when you do bring up these interesting ideas, you do want the movie to take its time to explore it. And the movie doesn't really seem to be that interested in it. It seems to be just more interested in crafting a really good mystery, which I do think this was a good mystery. But unfortunately, when you are going to be bringing up all of these really interesting ideas, you do want to explore it in a bit more juicier way. Something that I do also just want to mention, maybe this was accidental. I'm usually not someone that notices this type of stuff. I think this movie has kind of an irresponsible view on therapy. Without getting too much into it, the characters in this movie that we learn have been regularly going to therapy are the ones that we learn are essentially the ones that tend to be the most messed up. And I think this movie just kind of what I got from the movie saying is that like maybe I was looking too deep into it, but I think it was just okay. I'm just trying to collect my thoughts for a second. The statement this movie was saying about how like, oh, these characters that are going to therapy and are trying to get this type of help, and they're the ones that are causing the most pain, and what the movie is trying to say, like, people that go to therapy are just doing it for attention. I think it was just kind of irresponsible in a way. And maybe I'm not sure if Zoe Kravitz was trying to say anything there, but I think that was just sort of a message in poor taste. And I'm someone that has gone to therapy. I would vouch for anyone that feels like they need mental health help to go get it. And I'm not sure if I definitely don't think this movie tackles it in the most responsible way. I think the movie honestly works kind of best when it becomes a junk revenge fantasy. The last act of this movie, when all the characters who have been having wrongdoing finally get to have their revenge, when you have the main characters trying to escape the island, that's when I think the movie becomes the most fun. I think when the movie tries to really delve into these deep ideas, it just doesn't seem interested to dive into those ideas. And when it's just trying to be a revenge fantasy movie, that's when I had the most fun with this movie. If I were to rate this movie on a scale of 0 to 10 videotapes, I'm going to give it 7. I definitely think this was a good movie, a really solid directorial debut from Zoe Kravitz. Again, there are definitely some kinks that I think do need to be ironed out. It had a lot of ideas on its head that it just didn't seem that interested in exploring, but I can't deny that I definitely had a good time while watching the movie. And if you have time to see it in theaters, I do think it would be it would be worth your time if you've already seen some of the other better movies that have been released this year. But thank you all for watching this week. Remember to like this video and subscribe to the video store. It helps grow our channel a lot. Next week, 1992 opens, as well as some other movies. I'm going to try to look into that. It's the last week of August, which is always a slow month or slow week. So not a ton of big movies, but going to hopefully have a show next week. Thank you all for watching. It's always a pleasure talking movies with you guys. And remember, as always, watch more movies.
And the award for most vapid film review of the century goes to...
Okay, movie review. Okay, I thought it was beauty.
And he's now in cinema hell, where one day we'll all be reunited.
This is me at the Regal Cinema crying as I did through much of the film.